everyone. So hopefully you have found out by now, at least, that the circumference of a circle has something to do with this magical number pi. So the circumference, that pi is coming from the fact that it takes a little bit more than 3 of the diameter to wrap around a circle, and we still have a little space left over. So that amount of space is meaning that we need a little bit more than 3 diameters to get around, and it's actually that magical thing, pi. So we came up with this formula that circumference equals pi times the diameter. So you can figure out how far around a circle is if you know how far across it is across, and you multiply that by pi. Here's an example. Say our circle is 5 centimeters across. If I want to know how far it is all the way around, how far is that circumference, I would use my formula. I would say that my circumference has to equal pi times the diameter. So in my calculator, I would type in either the pi symbol times 5, or I would type in 3.14 times 5, and both will get you very close answers because 3.14 is actually a little bit of an estimation, so it's a little bit smaller than the value of pi, but you'd get close to, in either case, the answer 15.707. And there are probably more decimal places if you use the pi button going on, but here I've rounded it to the nearest thousandth, 10th, 100th, 1000th. Maybe they say, maybe we want to round it a little bit more down to the nearest 10th, so we could say that it would be about 15.7 centimeters around. So again, if the circumference was 5, the diameter was 5, the circle's circumference would be 15.7 centimeters. Now this formula is correct, and this is a correct way of doing a problem like that, but it's actually not the most common way we see the formula for circumference. Typically when we see circumference, we see radius in that formula. And the reason why is because radius is how we define how big a circle is. Radius is that distance that defines how big our circle will be, so it's the one that's more likely to be used. So let's come up with that formula for radius, using radius. So in a circle, the diameter all the way across is actually 2 radiuses. So in my formula for circumference, I'm going to fill in, instead of diameter, I'm going to write in 2 radiuses. So instead of diameter, I have for circumference, pi times 2 radiuses. And then because of the commutative property and because people like to see our numbers written first, they actually switch around the 2 and the pi and come up with this formula. This is the one I want you to remember. Circumference equals 2 pi r, where r is our radius, pi is pi, 2 is 2, and c is our circumference. So this is the formula that we're going to keep in mind as we work through some problems where we're asked to find the circumference of a circle or something about the circumference. So here we go. First problem. They give me a circle and they say this part of the circle is 10 centimeters, and they want to know the circumference. How far would it be all the way around? Well, the part of the circle that they give me is my radius. And I can use my formula to figure out the circumference. So I'll write down my formula. Circumference equals 2 pi radius, and this works for every circle. And I'm going to fill in the information that they give me. Circumference equals 2 pi times my radius, that's 10. You can type this into Google, the Google Calendar, 2 times pi times 10, because Google has a pi button. And that will give you an answer of 62.832, and there'll probably be some more. Or we could even leave this as the answer 20 pi, just by multiplying the two numbers together and treating pi, although it's not a variable, kind of like a variable in that regard, where we just write it there on the end. This is what we would call an exact answer, because there's no rounding happening. And then this is what we would call the rounded answer. Rounded, not rounded. Both answers are correct, except one is rounded and one is not. But for me, it would make more sense to see, okay, my circle is about 62, about 63 centimeters all the way around. But this one, I could also say the circle all the way around is 20 pi centimeters. Another similar question. In this circle, they give us the circumference. They say if you go all the way around, it's going to be 50.24 centimeters. And the question is, how big is that circle, right? That's how big it is outside, but what is the radius of the circle? So that's what we don't know. That's what we're going to solve for. Again, I'd go back to my formula. I would say my circumference equals 2 pi r. And I'd fill in what they tell me. They say the circumference part is 50.24. And that's equal to 2 times pi times r. Now I have a little equation to solve here. My job is to find this r. That's the thing I don't know. So I'll ask myself, well, what's happening to r? Oh, it's getting multiplied by 2 pi. 2 pi is just a number, it's close to 6-ish. And so if that's what's multiplying by r, my variable, my unknown, I'm going to divide both sides by 2 pi. This is something that you could type right into Google, 50.24 divided by 2 pi, and it would give you a decimal answer. I would suggest if you're typing this into Google, actually if you are, that you put parentheses around the denominator here. So everyone try that out. Type this into Google, see if you get that answer. What we should get is on this side, the 2 pi's cancel out, and I'm just left with what r is. And on the other side, when I divide 50.24 by 2 pi in parentheses, I actually end up with 7.99594 with some more decimal places. I wrote them all out here. So I would say that my radius had to be 7.99594 centimeters. You're going to be practicing on Khan Academy, and so sometimes they tell you how they'd like you to round. So maybe this time they say round to the nearest whole number. So I would round this to the nearest whole number. So all I want to have is a number here. I don't want any decimals. So I would take the next number and round up because it's a 9. That would be rounded to the nearest whole number, 8 centimeters. Maybe that's my answer. But I'm going to give you some, this would be a great answer. I just want to show you how else this number could be asked to be rounded. So maybe they asked us to round it to the nearest 10th, because sometimes they do that. So here's how I would round it to the nearest 10th. Okay, I'd locate the tenths, and then I would round up, because this number after it's a 9, so I would round up to 10 tenths, which would actually carry me over again to an 8 here. But I'd have to write a 0 in to show that I rounded to the nearest 10th. So just be careful when you're entering your answers into Khan Academy that you think about how it needs to round up. But that is how we would use this circumference formula to figure out the radius of a circle.